streaming television over the internet, welcome you. I'm hoping this will be an exciting class. I'm certainly feeling excited about it. And over the next 10 weeks, we will be walking through each one of the 10 planets in astrology. Tonight's class will give you a good idea as to the format that I will be following with each of the subsequent planets. So starting tonight, January 21st, the Sun, through Thursday, March 25th, which will be Pluto, will be working with each one of the planets. There are handouts for each of you, and those of you who are online, you can download your handouts off of the website. This will save you time in terms of writing. I've tried to include most everything that I use on my slides. It's not always the case because I'm constantly refining my program, so sometimes I'll go back in and add quotes or things after I've actually prepared the handouts. But you can write down the things that you don't have, but pretty much I've written down everything else for you. So, recently, I was with a friend watching a film on astrology, which he referred to as being an astrological apologetics, much in the tradition of Christian apologetics. Apologia meaning from the Greek to explain something. And what was pointed out to me was that he felt that this film did not really describe how astrology worked. So after my first quote here by Carl Jung, we're going to talk about how it is that the planets can actually have an impact over the affairs of humans. I think it's important to have the metaphysical concept in place. But I love this quote from Jung. The puzzling thing is that there is really a curious coincidence between astrological and psychological facts, so that one can isolate time from the characteristics of an individual, and also one can deduce characteristics from a certain time. Well, what we want to know right off as we start studying astrology is how does that happen? And this requires that we understand the metaphysics of astrology, which is basically the inner plane, outer plane relationship. And in one of my favorite books, which is out of print, but has been reprinted in the Church of Light Quarterly in the past, is The Beginner's Horoscope Maker and Reader. And in that book, Zane so succinctly says, the first thing the beginner student of astrology should clearly comprehend is the nature of the interrelationship between the two planes of being, and how it is possible, or non-physical energies, missing a letter here, for non-physical energies through boundary line electromagnetic forces having approximately the velocity of light to influence physical life. Astrological energies, while they may influence not only electromagnetic energies having approximately the velocity of light, but also electromagnetic energies within a living organism on levels where velocities are much slower than light, are not physical, but chiefly belong to the astral plane. Well, to give a more detailed image in pictorial terms of what he's talking about, there's basically a relationship between the inner and outer plane. The inner plane we refer to as the astral, the word astral meaning of the stars. The astral plane interpenetrates and has a molding effect over the physical. Basically, astrology works through the idea that events happening in the soul in the astral or the inner plane take place first before filtering down to the slower moving physical substance. And the way they do that is they have to pass through this boundary line here, which we've given as 186,100, that should read 72 miles per second. I have it moving 10 miles faster per second than Einstein did. But that is the speed of light.
It's in the noise.
So, this represents your soul or your astrological chart. It basically resides in a subconscious realm, in an astral realm. This is your physical body, occupying the physical plane. There is a relationship between the two of them, which operates through this boundary line that we've discussed. So, this is the process by which the planets affect us. Basically, the energies being radiated by the planets have a reflection in the soul of us humans, as well as the soul of other living creatures. And what happens is astrological stimulus affects the way in which we think and feel on a subconscious level. And that works to move into slower moving physical substance, which is where we attract the events and activities into our lives. So basically, like attracts like. Our thinking and our feeling propels us into doing, into taking action, and that in turn attracts events to us. Ultimately, the idea is we draw events into our lives that mirror our states of consciousness. And our states of consciousness are mirrored in the charter of birth, in the horoscope. So, whether one attracts in opportunities with money and abundance, with good health, with companionship, whether one has a lack of opportunities, a dearth of opportunities, physical illness or injury, or experiences solitude, and numerous other types of activities are mapped out in the chart of birth. So, the way we are going to learn this over the next 10 weeks is looking at each of the planets as a thought cell. And these are thought cells in our consciousness. They're functioning in this fourth dimensional realm. They impact dominant trends of thinking, which is going to be a key in this class. Each week, we're going to be discovering a different dominant trend of thinking and looking at what type of life experiences that attracts. Now, the specific nature of that dominant trend of thinking is determined by the planetary thought series. If those thought cells in a chart are harmonious, they tend to attract pleasurable events. And if those thought cells in the chart are discordant, then they tend to have a predisposition towards attracting painful events. This will make more sense over the next few weeks as we start applying this information. Question, Vicki?
No, I want to say a question. If your chart of birth has harmonious aspects or planets, does that mean they'll always be harmonious? Or if you have discordant planets or aspects, do they always have to be discordant? Or?
It's a great question. Hopefully everyone heard that. But to paraphrase it, if your birth chart is is harmonious, will your life always be harmonious? If your birth chart is discordant, will your life always be discordant? And the answer is no. All the birth chart shows is a slice of consciousness at a time. And this time is the moment you take your first independent action apart from your mother, when you start breathing on your own. You can see in the word breath in Latin, respire, spirit is in there. So the spirit comes into the body with the first breath. And astrology is based on the fact that the map of the heavens, mirroring that moment, mirrors the spirit of the individual. Now, to answer your question, what happens is, if the chart is discordant at birth, one can actually learn to change those activities through the process of what we call alchemy. That's another class, but we'll touch upon it in this one. But it's a process of reconditioning our thought cells to express in more pleasurable ways. It is the hardest work you will ever do in your life. And it's the most worthwhile work you will ever do in your life. So it's something we should all make a daily habit of working on. So one can reconfigure or repattern the thought cells. And the other thing is, what takes place is from birth forward, the planets continue to move. And throughout our lives, they're forming relationships to one another, both by what we call progressions, which can be majors, minors, and transits. And they also form relationships to the chart of birth. And they stimulate what we refer to as astrological weather conditions. So there are temporary timing of events in our lives, which can also have the ability to attract painful or pleasurable events. So basically, reworking one's thinking through conversion or antidotes and the temporary timing of progressions determines the way in which things unfold in one's life. Alright, in ancient times, astronomers noted how what appeared to be certain stars moved across the sky in relation to other stars. The ancient Greeks called these wandering stars planetes asteres, or wandering stars, or simply planetary, which is wanderers. And that is where we derive our word planet. If you go out there and look at the sky tonight, out here in the west, you can see Jupiter brightly shining. And it becomes obvious as you watch it every night that it slowly is moving in the heavens and rising and setting at a different time of day and against a different star pattern in the background. So otherwise it would just look like another big bright star to all of us. So those are the planets, and they wander against the background of the zodiac. Now what we'll be talking about in this class are urges or thought cells. So we're looking at the planets from somewhat of a psychological point of view in terms of what is the impact of planets on consciousness. We're looking at what Jung was describing in our first quotation. There is a synchronicity here. So tonight we will be discussing the power urges of the soul. Next week, domestic. That will be followed by intellectual, social, aggressive, religious, safety, individualistic, utopian, and universal welfare urges. Each of these are a different part of our consciousness, and as we look in each one of these classes, we'll be looking at a personality, the chart of a personality that has these thought cells highly operative within them. And we'll be able to see what the imprint is on character. So, tonight's class is on the sun. This is the power urges in the soul. And I thought we'd start out by talking about what the sun is physically. And the sun is actually sort of a middle-sized star, which is at the center of our solar system. In astrology, we use the term planets to cover not only the planets, but also the luminaries, the sun and the moon. The sun is a minor star, and the moon is a satellite moving around the Earth. But we know what they are, but we still lump them into the term planets. Now, the sun is thought to be about 4.57 billion years old. I can't count that far. But it was a long time ago when all of this happened. Now, in the 3rd century BC, Aristophanes accurately estimated the distance between the sun and the earth at 149 million kilometers, or approximately 92 million miles. That's, almost 2,400 years ago that he came up with this measurement. The Earth and the other planets orbit around the sun, along with materials such as asteroids, meteoroids, comets, and dust. Not only do you have it in your house, it's there in outer space as well. Yes, we will always be dusting. Now, through the process of photosynthesis, the sun is the source of all life on Earth. Almost all life on Earth. Because not all life on Earth is the product of photosynthesis, but it does derive its energy from the sun. If you estimate that the Earth and the other planets were spewed out from the same original mass as the sun, the heat of the Earth's core actually, in certain parts of the ocean floor where the sunlight does not reach, spews out superheated waters on which certain creatures live. So inadvertently, the sun is at work there as well, even though it's not the process of photosynthesis happening. But almost all the rest of life is dependent on the light from the sun. Now, the sun is a magnetically active star with a field that changes its direction approximately every 11 years. This gives rise to sunspots and solar flares, which impact the auroras of the Earth's atmosphere, and they can cause disruption to electric power and radio communications. So this is a little bit about the physical sun. Throughout history, the sun has been an object of veneration in many cultures. To the Egyptians, they believed that the sun actually traveled in a solar barge, and that his presence in the sky created day, and his absence created night. Heliopolis, or the city of the sun, was dedicated to the sun god Ra, and in the 13th century before the Christian era, the religious reformist Akhenaten built his city, Akhenaten.
We lost it.
Let's see.
Go back.
If I can figure out how to. No. Using my mouse. No. Previous. There we go. Built his city, Akhenaten, and established a monotheistic religion with the visible sun as the central deity. To the Greeks and Romans, the sun was Apollo, or Helios, who rode in a chariot, governed. Here we have I'm ahead of myself. See, as I said, you can't trust my notes. Sometimes I add additional slides. This happened this afternoon. To the Sumerians and Babylonians, the sun was known as Shamash and appealed to by the sick and those suffering from demons. Good to know if you're ever suffering from demons. Here we have the Greeks and Romans. Apollo, who rode in a chariot, governed medicine, healing, and the theater. It was very important in Roman and Latin tradition, and December 25th, which in the Julian calendar was the winter solstice. It was actually celebrated as the birthday of the invincible sun, Dies Natalis Solis Invicti. We recently, a month ago from today, we celebrated the winter solstice. And what happens is between now and the middle of June, the sun's going to grow brighter every day in the northern hemisphere. The days become longer in this process. You may notice when you get up in the morning, there's actually possibly a little bit of light happening, and your days are longer at the end of the day. This also shows the sun being pulled in somewhat of a chariot. This is Sol, or the Norse sun god. Interestingly enough, in Nordic mythology, the sun was feminine. And she was followed by her sister, Mani, the moon. The Incas worshipped the sun as Inti, and many of the archaeological sites in Peru and Andean sites are really in part based for solar sighting. And on the Aztecs, Tonatiuh was their solar deity. And in India, Surya is the sun, and much like Apollo, he rides through the heavens in a chariot. So this gives you a sense of the sun personality as represented in mythology, and these have parallels in the psychology of astrology that's represented by the horoscope.
Christopher, do you know whether or not the other planetary energies were represented in those cultures as predominantly as the solar power was?
Some of them were, and we'll get to them over the next 10 weeks. Okay. Of course, not the upper octaves, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. They're related to in classical Greco-Roman mythology, but they don't necessarily. I've not done a deep enough study to know if they show up in some form in other cultures. And different cultures, again, also have different emphasis. For example, Venus was considered very important in Mesoamerican astrology and the cycles of Venus, though there she corresponded to the god of war, whereas in Western tradition, Babylonian tradition, Indian tradition, Mars corresponds. So there are some slight differences that come up. So when we look at a chart, here are some of the factors that we are extracting from a chart. We look at the sun as it impacts our vital life force, our sense of significance, our relationships with authority figures, relationships with the male sex in general, father figures, and the sun in our chart indicates our opportunities for awards, honors, and recognition. Some of the key words that we use to describe the sun is we say the department of life in which the sun falls. This means the mundane house of your chart is subject to vigor. What's vigor? Does anyone have vigor? Vigor is a lot of energy. It's energy and it's a lot of it. The positive trait of the sun we describe as rulership. Somebody who's able to exercise authority. And a good ruler is somebody who listens to the ideas of others and then digests them and seeks a way to govern them, having utilized their ideas. So what's the opposite of that? Very good, a dictator. So the negative traits of the sun are dictativeness. With all net people that fall under both categories. So, when we analyze a chart, we call the sun's presence in the chart the power thought zone. The house it falls in is subject to vigor. The alchemical metal of the sun is gold. That which is brilliant, resists acids and corrosion, is considered to be of the highest value. The gemstone, sunstone, the color, the portion of the color spectrum that is said to represent the sun is the color orange. The musical tone of D. In the physical body, the heart, the back, and the spine come under the rulership of the sun. Here are some thoughts. These power urges are not only present in human beings. There are some plants that have such great vitality, they can live thousands of years. Here you can see bee colonies and termite colonies. And if you think about it, status is important in life, which the sun rules. In fact, so much so that certain species only allow what we call the queens to reproduce, the royalty, so to speak. What can be observed out here in parts of the New Mexican wilderness among wild horses is that a stallion will dominate a herd. They too are the only one in the group in what's called a harem that have the privilege to reproduce. There is status involved here. Male lion protects his pride. And in human culture, status is based either on bloodlines or oftentimes on special ability. These are all expressions of the power urges, from great vitality to special privilege. And we all know there are advantages to be gained from authorities. In fact, I was reading very interesting article this morning in the latest National Geographic on the polygamous families in Arizona, Texas, and Utah. And how they're, again, much like the pride of the lion or the stallion with the harem, only, you gotta figure, there's what, 51 women to every 49 men in the world? So, the averages in any community are not great for polygamy. If somebody has, 5 to 6 wives, that starts to cut down on the opportunities for other males within the group, much like in herds of stallions and herds of lions. So it was, fascinating to read about that and how there were all of these outcast young men that are ending up on the streets in Salt Lake City and other places because they are basically being shunned by their communities. So here's another scenario in human life where the privilege to reproduce is restricted to only those in power. All right, this is from Ancient Masonry by C.C. Zane, where he says, the sun is symbolized by the disk of spirit within which is a dot or nucleus. Even as all physical life has its origin in a single cell, so the circle within which is a dot indicates limitless powers and possibilities. Power, dominion, vitality, strength, and radiant energy are represented. The sun is the father of all life, the source of all energy, the controlling potency of our solar system. Those dominated by his influence are proud, majestic, combative, discreet, magnanimous, self-confident, kind, and benign. The sun is the Egyptian Osiris. Now, in Hermetic astrology, the sun represents the power urges. These are considered to be one of the most deep-seated urges within the soul. Because of this, the sign in which the sun falls in one's chart is considered to be of great importance. And although there are many millions of Americans that know a little bit about astrology, what do you think they know? Their sun sign. But nevertheless, it is compelling and can tell us a lot of information about ourselves. Most of us, our first connection with astrology was through sun sign astrology. The power urges within the chart contribute to our feelings of significance, and they express a self-worth and self-esteem. We'd say the sun is masculine, electric, and positive in his polarity. And just as the physical sun is the source of all light and warmth, in astrology he rules the heart, the symbolic seat of our vitality. Here's a great quote from Mental Alchemy. As the positive electric effort energy which gives vitality and recuperative power, the ability to govern and direct others, and the power to rise to a position which gives authority over others are expressions of thought elements of the power family, they cannot be too abundant for welfare. People with weak power urges do not have long lives. Well, that's disappointing. There must be something else we have to look forward to. All successful politicians have these thought elements prominent. So, now we want to look at the conditioning energy in the chart. What is it like to have harmonious sun energy? And My objective over the next few weeks is to get you to understand what the nature of each planet is and how that nature has polarity. It can express in either constructive or destructive ways. Because when we go to work on looking at aspects, over the next 10 weeks, each night we're going to choose one aspect that we're working with so that we grow in our depth of understanding of that particular planetary combination. So, if the sun is harmonious in your chart, you attract leadership opportunities, vitality, the respect of others, honors, awards, and positive experiences with authority figures. Well, guess what? We all have some of these to some degree at some point in our life. Can everyone agree on that? That somewhere in your life you've at least had one of these? And guess what? We all will have at some point distorted some experiences, which could be either when we are prideful. Have any of you ever been dictated? Egotistic? Have you ever lost honor over something or felt a loss of self-esteem? And can you imagine having problems with authorities? So we all will have periods to some degree where we can express discordant power urges. What's helpful, though, is by being able to look at the chart and determining the strength of each planet and its natural predisposition towards harmony or discord. Because that will tell you which side of these scales tend to be tipped, which you're going to have more of. So, my goal is to increase all of your vocabulary. And I'm going to throw out some subtraits, and you don't have to do shorthand on this, because I've actually included these in your notes. Then I've left a few things out. Vocabulary building is so important when you go to read a chart. So some positive solar traits could be described as attentive, authoritative, chivalrous, commanding, confident, considerate, courteous, dependable, dutiful, full of life, genial, gracious, lively, paternal, poised, polite, positive, powerful, protective, proud, regal, reliable, respected or respectful, self-assured, self-determined, solicitous, thoughtful, vigorous, vital, warm, and well-mannered. How does that vocabulary make you feel? That's good. These are words that make us feel good. All right. Now on to the next thing. These are what we would describe as negative solar traits, or distorted power urges in a chart. Being arrogant, aristocratic, authoritarian, bossy, a braggart, bureaucratic, conceited, condescending, controlling, demanding, dictatorial, domineering, haughty, insecure, intrusive, meek, a micromanager, name dropper, somebody who is officious, overbearing, overly confident, patronizing, prideful, pompous, puffed up, rigid, self-effacing, self-important, smug, snobbish, superior, vain, and vainglorious. How does that make you feel? Like you need to take a shower, something like that. How surprising. Well, as you can see here, the negative traits of the sun can be traits that are either an excessive sense of self-esteem or a lack thereof. So the power urges can function either way, where one is so important because they're so insignificant, or one is so important because they feel they're so important. So, the other thing we want to use in our vocabulary building is to look around us, and one of the aspects of astrology can be career and vocational capsule. So it's important to note what type of professions one might be cut out for, or to be able to identify the signature of a particular planet within an environment. So solar-type occupations would be anyone who's an administrator, any authority figures in our lives, bosses, the chairman, the chairwoman, a champion, a conductor, dignitaries, directors, governors, heroes, heroines, the king, the manager, the mayor, the official, the president, the prince, the princess, the principal, the queen, the superior, the superintendent, the supervisor, the star, or the winner. What do all of these categories have in common? They're in charge. They're in control. So that's the nature of the power thought cells, to be in charge. So what I have chosen tonight is a dominant sun personality. Donald Trump. Does that name ring a bell for anyone? Yeah. You might see him on Life Spoils of the Rich and Famous. So let's talk about this. I've included a sample of his chart towards the back of your handouts. But what we are working with in Hermetic astrology is a process called astrodies. The word astro means star, dyna means power. I might repeat this every week for the next 10 weeks. But it is a method that was developed between the 1920s and 40s by C.C. Singh, with the assistance of students scattered around the world who were part of the Church of Light Astrological Research Department. Some of you have heard this story before. And basically, they were searching for a method by which they could quantify energy within a chart, to be able to determine both power and then the conditioning energy of that power for harmony or discord. These three things give us a lot of information. Now, power alone in a chart, there are probably three factors which contribute to it. And one of those factors is that the luminaries, being the sun and the moon, are naturally more powerful than the other planets. Just by a little bit. There are houses within a chart that are considered to be more powerful. We will talk about this a little bit later in tonight's class if we actually get that far through everything I've prepared. But looking here up at the chart, house number 1, 4, 7, and 10 are considered to be wide open doors to the astral energies. We call them angular houses. So planets in angular houses tend to carry more weight than the planets in the other houses. The other factor is aspects add power to a chart. Aspects in Hermetic astrology, we work with 10 distinct different vortexes. These are patterns in which, or angles, at which planetary energies meet with one another, and they form swirls and vortexes in this astral substance that has both a volume of energy, but also a type of conditioning energy. So certain aspects are considered more powerful than others, such as conjunctions and oppositions, which are more powerful than trines and squares and sextiles, which are more powerful than inconjunct semi-sextiles and semi-squares. Perhaps the most powerful of all the aspects is the parallel. Now, that's taken into account. Aspects as they are applying are considered more powerful than separating aspects. The closer to perfect an aspect is, the more powerful it is. Well, in astrodynes, each of these factors is given a quantitative value, and they are all added up to determine power. So if we look here at Trump's chart, we can see that the Sun, by astrodyne power, is 82.08. The Moon is 80.47. If we were to break that down into the percentage of the total power, well, the Sun is 15.3 and the Moon is 15.0. So they're practically equal in strength in the chart. And look at the chart. The Sun, 22 Gemini. The Moon, 20 Sagittarius. What does that tell us about this individual? He's born on a special day that happens once every 28 days. Got a full moon. So you've got the Sun and the Moon opposite one another and pulling in different directions on one another. And so there's great force between these two planets in his chart. So no doubt he does have lunar traits, and my guess is that those caring, nurturing traits are probably qualities of his that are more known by either his lovers or his children. The rest of us that might know him as a public figure are going to see more of the solar traits. This is something that is above the horizon, and it falls in the 11th compartment of his chart. What matters are governed by the 11th house? Can anyone volunteer?
Friends, hopes, organizations,
groups, clubs, one's community, larger social circles. I still ponder the hopes and wishes aspects of the 11th house, and I hope someday that epiphany will come to me. I've yet clearly to see it functioning in a chart, but I have always seen the greater group functioning in the chart through the 11th house. So where do you think this individual will seek his power? Among other powerful people.
Oh, yeah. Powerful friends.
So this is one thing that would stand out about this man, is that like attracts like. And if the Sun is his dominant planet, the position in the chart where it falls, we say, is subject to vigor. So in his chart, the 11th house of friendships is being vitalized. Do you think it would be important to him in terms of which socialist or registry he's on, or what party he's invited to? I guess that is based on the chart. That who you're hobnobbing with, who you're rubbing elbows with, which the 11th house can be not only groups and organizations, this can be political parties, or what we might call power brokers. So the way the person with the 11th house, with the Sun in the 11th house, generally knows they're powerful is by having powerful friends. That's the way in which they know that they've somehow come of age. So what we need to do, we can see that the Sun is minus 4.96 discordines, which actually makes it the fourth most discordant of his planets. But when we go over our vocabulary list of both positive and negative traits, again, we only know Donald Trump's public side, the side that shows up in the news, which he's very good at keeping himself in the spotlight. But if we were to go back to some of our vocabulary traits, Diane, pick something from the positive solar traits that you think describes Donald Trump, that you may have seen on television or...
Well, he's certainly authoritative. I mean, he's very confident.
Vicki, do you want to pick one from the positive list?
Powerful.
Samara? You'll pass? Okay. How about you, Anne?
Proud and regal.
Proud and regal. All right.
I'm interested in age.
Yeah, I mean, he's somebody, you see his vitality in film or photographs, etc., that he comes across as a commanding presence.
He's got Leo rising, too.
Well, and I think that's where the sun also draws some of the power, is from that as well. So, yes, it comes across in the way in which he presents himself, fine tailored suits, probably expensive suits. Now, let's go to the negative solar traits. Can anyone pick anything from that list? I think I watched maybe 10 minutes of his show once. If I had a pen, I could probably mark off each one of these traits.
Ambitious.
Body, arrogant,
What's that? Smug,
overbearing,
Yeah, you could pick a lot of them for him.
rigid.
That too.
So what my goal is here is for you to be able to see what the imprint is in a chart. The dominant planet in each of our charts is important, but I must also say that every planet in our chart is important. Every planet in our chart falls in some sign. It falls in one of the houses, and there's a very good chance it makes at least one aspect to another planet. It is the rarest thing to have an unaspected planet in a chart. Maybe I've seen one once in my lifetime, and I've looked at a few thousand charts. So chances are there's also an aspect going on. But what we'll be doing in each of the classes over the next 10 weeks is looking at a different dominant personality and looking to see, do the traits of this planet really leave an imprint on character and expression? Excuse me. Yes.
You said that the most powerful aspects were the conjunction and the opposition, and he has both of them in the sun.
Yes, he does. And in fact, I think the next page down, I've given you the aspects to his sun. So it will look like this in your handouts, or it will look like that on the screen. So, most powerful aspects are oppositions and conjunctions. And among his aspects, you can see, when we read Astrodynes, the upper line is the power of the aspect, and the lower line shows the conditioning energy, the amount of harmony or discord it has. So you can see that the conjunction with Uranus is neutral. The Sun is a neutral planet. I'm sorry, Bob, I didn't understand. Okay.
Where is it on the...
Thank you. That's a good question. I love it when you use your words. Where is it? This is the Uranus. When we read an aspect graph, we go one planet to each of the others. So the Sun, Uranus, conjunct. Here we can see the power of the conjunction, which is, 6 degrees apart? 5 degrees apart? It's a 5 degree separation of aspects, so it's not that powerful. And what's happening? Which planet moves faster, the Sun or Uranus?
Separating.
It's a separating aspect because the Sun moves 1 degree a day, And offhand, I don't know how many degrees a day Uranus moves.
Very slowly.
Very slowly. I know it moves 360 degrees in about 84 years. So pull out your handheld calculator and you can figure that out. So this line is the power, and this is the conditioning energy. The Sun is a neutral planet, Uranus is a neutral planet, and the conjunction is a neutral aspect. Which planets are harmonious?
Jupiter and Venus.
Jupiter and Venus, the greater and lesser benefic, discordant, Saturn and Mars. Those planets will add conditioning to an aspect. Now, on the other hand, the opposition is a negative aspect. So here, we can see a very powerful opposition. It's 2 degrees apart. 20 degrees Sagittarius, 41 minutes for the Moon. 22 Gemini, 53 minutes for the Sun. That gives it a power of just over 10 astronauts. 1030, and that power is completely negative. The reason for that? The Sun's neutral, the Moon is neutral, but the opposition is a highly discordant aspect. So we can see here, all of the power in this aspect is also conditioned discordantly because of the nature of the aspect. And again, if you don't understand all of this immediately, we've got 10 weeks ahead of us where we'll be hammering these concepts in. But I wanted you to get a picture of it. The other thing is if we look at the Sun by aspects on the chart, the Sun forms an aspect basically to every planet except Mercury and Neptune. So there is some energy being received by the Sun from just about every planet.
Look at all those parallels, too.
And, thank you, Vicki, the other thing is, the Sun, if you go down, where you see these graded squares, this separates the aspects in the upper right-hand half of the grid are aspects measured by zodiacal longitude. In the lower left half of the grid are aspects measured by declination. Declination is planets falling north or south of the celestial equator, which is an extension of the Earth's equator out into space. With parallels, we only allow 1 degree orbit aspect, so they tend to be very tight and very powerful aspects, and the nature of the parallel is intensity, but it's neutral. And the way I try to describe the parallel, and we'll talk about this when we do Pluto, the very last class, I look at the parallel as being the volume control. It's like having an amplifier.
Sorry, what was that? Is the volume control?
Yes, a parallel just amps up the volume in a chart. So depending on what the music is, it's just increased by this. So look at the power of the Sun-Moon. The Sun is not only opposition to the Moon, but it's also parallel to the Moon. An enormously powerful aspect. So these are all adding energy to the Sun and making it that singular standout planet in this chart. Any questions thus far?
You know, it's interesting, though, I'm not sure it's his domestic life, but he's been noted for his relationships.
His fluctuating relationships?
Just with women, yeah. And then his children also seem to be prominent in
and that's the second strongest planet. And is the Moon in the 5th house. So because it's both parallel and opposition to the sun, the thing we have to keep in mind about aspects, it's kind of like a spider web. When you go into the web, it starts pulling on all the strings. That there's an interrelationship that goes on within the chart, that when you're caught in that web, you start tugging on different strings. So something that is this powerful, this is the single most powerful aspect in his chart. If I don't need to go back because you have this in your handouts, but it is the parallel from the sun to the moon. The next most powerful aspect? Yes.
I'm going to pause and change the date.
Okay, we're going to pause and change the tape. It's been an hour. If anyone needs cookies, coffee, I think mine's cold. I'm just hoping it's going to
Yeah, it's not. When they're on the table.
delicious.
This one has...
And at 6 a.m.
Are the Astrological on your hands?
All right. The next concept I wanted to embrace in tonight's class is the planets are musical tones. In course 2, before I go on to that, a few things I forgot to say at the beginning. Most of you who are viewing at a distance, let us know how the sound is, quality of the picture, any feedback you want to give on the class. Your feedback is important to us, as are those of you in class. And again, you can donate online. So, in the course, and I wanted to talk about the books. There are 3 books I highly recommend. You probably only need one to start out in this class, which is the birth chart, and it's Psychological and Environmental Correspondences, which sells for $13.95. This is by Dennis Sutton, one of our authors in Australia. Brilliant astrologer and writer. A lot of good information can be found in Natal Astrology, which is course 10-1 of the Brotherhood of Light lessons. And another personal favorite is How to Read Cosmodines by the late Doris Chase Doan. So,
Cosmodines are the same thing as Astrological.
they are the same thing as Astrologicals, but Astrologicals is a registered trademark, so Cosmodines is something that's used by other writers working in the public. So those are the books. All right. So the concept is, in course 2, Astrological Signatures, Zane describes every astrological chart as though it were a musical composition. And I really like that description. And the planets, which are pretty much key in this composition, represent the tones. Now, if I was a trained musician, I would be able to tell you what that tone was, and I'm not. So that would make me tone deaf. But nevertheless, I can't distinguish between different tones. I just can't label them. So each planet represents a distinct tone or vibration, just as each musical note is distinct in its frequency. We have 10 notes in astrology, and we're learning each of these notes each of these weeks. In the Beginner's Horoscope Maker and Reader, out of print, but such a great book. Excuse the lengthy reading of the quote. I'm at that age where I need glasses both to see close up and at a distance. So I'm struggling here. Observation has demonstrated that there are 12 major distinctive fields of force, which commonly are called zodiacal signs. Each of these 30-degree areas along the path of the sun has also 3 minor equal divisions called decades. This goes to the question you asked earlier, Diane. Because they are 10 degrees in extent. The sign of the zodiac each impart their peculiar quality to the influence of any planet found in them. And the decadents each still further modify this tone quality. The most permanent of all astrological effects is the distinctive tone or characteristic influence of each planet. It is only the resonance of the tone, not its pitch, which is affected by the sign, and to a less degree by the decadent from which its influence comes to Earth. That was a mouthful, but key. Basically, the planets are the tones, the signs are the sounding boards or the instruments. That same tone will sound different to us whether it's on a cello or on a piccolo, even though it is a frequency, air moving at a particular vibration or rate of frequency. Now, aspects, which we've been talking about, form that composition. And it's the composition that strongly determines whether this music is something that's pleasing to our ears, or whether to us it's somehow dissonant. So the aspects add idiosyncrasies and conditioning energy to the chart. They help to determine whether or not it is a dissonant or a harmonious composition. What are aspects? We briefly touched upon them already. They are the geometric angles which the planetary energies form with one another as they radiate towards Earth. Aspects add energy or power to any chart. Aspects contribute conditioning energy, which is harmony or discord, to any chart. And the relative harmony or discord of the sun is determined from the sign in which he falls and the aspects received from other planets. So here is a concept that we're touching on right now, which is the sounding board in which any planet falls also offers either some resistance or assistance to that planet. For example, when we talk about the sun being at home or ruling the sign of Leo, the qualities of Leo are so similar to the qualities expressed by the sun that there's a natural harmonious association between the two of them. We say the sun is exalted in the sign of Aries, meaning that in Aries, the sun can express his energy unhindered, and that it's at its harmony in the sign of Sagittarius. So these are 3 placements which offer assistance to the planet. While opposite each of those signs, whether it's in Aquarius, where the sun then is at its fall, is that correct? Exaltation, fall? I'll have to call it a table of essential dignities. In Aquarius, has difficulty expressing. The same with Gemini, and the same with Libra, opposite of the sign of Aries. It's at its fall in Libra, it's at its detriment in the sign of Aquarius, and it's at its inharmony in Gemini. So, we've already pretty much covered this. In reading the aspect graph, the upper number represents the astrogate power, and the lower number represents the harmony or discord of the aspect. Where I find this most important, if you're looking at your own chart, I highly recommend that you go and perhaps circle your top 4 aspects in your chart by power. And then start studying about the nature of the aspect and the planets involved. These are going to stand out in your life as key motivating factors. You want to also circle your most harmonious aspect, and you want to circle your most discordant aspect. Once you discover your most harmonious aspect, you want to work it. You want to do everything that represents those planets in combination with one another that you can. And once you discover your most distorted aspect, you also have to work it, but in a different way. And this is generally through exercising control and through converting the energies into some type of constructive expression. Because that will be one of the areas in your life where you may feel you get repeatedly stung. Now, aspects differ in their potency, from extremely mild to extremely powerful. Their conditioning energy can be harmonious, discordant, or neutral. The neutral aspects are the conjunction, which is 0 degrees, any 2 planets in the same degree, and the inconjunct, which is 150 degrees, sometimes called a quincunx, though there are some astrologers that do assign discord to that aspect. But in Hermetic astrology, we see the inconjunct as a neutral aspect, and the parallel, which is determined by declination. The harmonious aspects, starting with the mildest of harmonies, is the semisextile, which brings growth. That's followed by the sextile, an aspect which attracts opportunities, and the trine, which is considered a luck factor in astrology. And then on the level of discord, starting at the mildest discord, the semi-square, which brings friction into one's life, the sextile square, which brings agitation, the square, obstacles, and the opposition, which is separation. We're moving from the mildest expression of discord to the greatest expression of discord. Tonight's class, I wanted to talk about the conjunction, because the conjunction by nature is similar in some ways to the quality of the sun. The sun, which represents significance in a chart, we say that the conjunction aspect brings prominence. So, excuse me as I lose my voice. Wherever you have a conjunction in your chart, chances are this is an area that you are somehow known for. This is part of your personality that stands out big time. So you too, when you leave class tonight, just go home, look at your own chart, and find all your conjunctions. What's happening in a conjunction compound is when you have any 2 planets that are in the same degree, and basically their energies are moving along the same path. So they're continually reinforcing one another. The challenge with a conjunction, however, is it becomes almost impossible to separate one planetary thought cell from the other. There's a type of meshing or entrainment that happens between the 2 of them. So when you're stimulating one form of thinking, inadvertently you're stimulating the other. Because it's neutral, what we know with conjunctions, if Venus or Jupiter are involved, they add harmony, 1/4 or 1/2 harmony. And if Mars or Saturn are involved, they add either 1/4 or 1/2 discord to the conjunction. So, conjunctions are important. Not only do they represent areas of great significance in the chart, when by progressions you have conjunctions, these are times in your life where you are having significant events coming into your life. In fact, in progressions, when we do minors and transiting progressions in the Church of Light, we only look at conjunctions and oppositions to any planets that are already involved in a nature progressed aspect. Those are considered to add enough rallying energy or reinforcing energy to stimulate an activity. Oh, this is interesting. Does anyone know what I'm doing?
It must be someone's chart.
You might want to move the camera onto the screen so that you've got it? Great, thanks. So you've got things going on back there that I don't even know about. All right, here's a chart, and somehow I got all of the animations in reverse order. I was actually just seeing if you were awake still after an hour and a half of my teaching. So, here are conjunctions in this chart. There are more. There's one more that I left out because my eyes are so bad. But, here we go. We have a conjunction from the Sun to Uranus. Who dares to venture some creative vocabulary with this? We have the power urges, the Sun, in a prominence compound with the individualistic urges of Uranus. Makes me think of the Frank Sinatra song, I Did It My Way. That would be the anthem playing in the background here.
And I've actually heard him say that.
Oh. Okay.
He talks about how, the opportunities that lay before him, he saw so much more potential in them, and he went off and did it his way. And he did better than his father, and seemed to pay off for him.
Okay, so that is a prominence compound. You have these two thought cells that are seeking to express themselves, but they cannot do it apart from one another. So he cannot stimulate his sense of self-esteem without stimulating what else? His sense of uniqueness, or his sense of individuality. And vice versa. This is a man who can't think of his inventions, his discovery, his uniqueness without feeling really good about it. Here's another one. That conjunction is pictured here. 17 degrees to 22 degrees, we decided that's 5 degrees apart and separating. The next conjunction is Venus and Saturn. That's curious, 23 to 25. Venus is the social urges of the soul, combined with the safety urges of the soul. I'm detecting a conflict here. Because Venus is one of the planets we look for in order to understand our love nature and the way in which our affections express. But we also look to the 5th house in a chart to determine that. Now, what would the moon in the 5th house tell us about someone's love life? You'll know better next week when we discover that wherever the moon falls in the chart, that area is subject to fluctuation. And the moon in Sagittarius?
He's exploring.
Yes. What do they say? A ship in every port? Something like that. But on the other hand, we can see here in the 12th house of inner space or one's, deep unconscious desires, there's Venus tied up with Saturn, the safety urges or the sense of security. is also tied up with the affections. So somewhere in all of this, one would see, a deep need for bonding, for companionship, the hopes of creating lasting relationships. Though one thing I've frequently discovered with clients who have a lot of money is it's oftentimes hard for them to perceive whether somebody loves them for who they are or but for the resources that they can provide them. So that could be a challenge there, and my guess is with this active in the chart, in the 12th house, there could be some, hidden sorrows around love and romance, and with Saturn there, possibly feeling taken advantage of. And I think one of the other things that does appear in the news at times what are they, prenuptial arrangements? One way to ensure somebody doesn't love you for your money is you create an agreement in the beginning. You leave me and you get only this. And another conjunction, Mars conjunct the ascendant.
That's a really wide one,
To me, it looks like it's 9 degrees. So let's look at the power of that. So how's that for a conjunction? It's weak, but nevertheless, it is prominent.
And it's in the first house, so that makes it.
How would that come across in terms of somebody's personality, this conjunction? Mars in the first house alone makes one lucid.
Keep going, so what questions from the audience?
Oh, yes, speak, audience, speak.
For us, what about a conjunction with Mercury on the first row?
But I see no conjunction to Mercury.
There's one to Uranus.
There is a conjunction to Uranus, which we've already discussed. But here, you can see there's no aspect from the Sun to Mercury. And Mercury forms no conjunction to any other planet. It makes no aspect to the Sun, no aspect to the Moon. Mercury forms no aspect to Venus, semi-square to Mars, no aspect to Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, a square to Neptune, semi-sextile to Pluto, and a sextile to the midheaven. So perhaps there's another question in there, Phil, that you might actually have, and I don't. All right, so Mars in the first house makes for a dynamic, powerful, passionate, expressive personality. Aggressive personality. And here we have the aggressive urges in a prominent compound with the personality, the ascendant. How will that come across in his self-expression? Does he seem at all pushy?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
He can't avoid it. And with that conjunction to Pluto from the 12th house, he's really overboard.
That is the last conjunction which Vicky pointed out, which is here, Pluto. We're supposed to be using a laser. Pluto conjunct the ascendant. The way that's viewed is here. Pluto at 10 Leo, the ascendant at 17 Leo. It's a 7-degree conjunction. So it's got 4.47 asteroids. It's also weak, but nevertheless, Pluto brings in a sense of compulsion. Pluto tends to be compelling, and Pluto wants others to fit in and to conform. how does one conform to something that's unique and individualistic? You've got to make it up as you go along, because there isn't a set pattern or plan. And I think I watched for maybe 10 minutes once because it really didn't interest me. But there was a show, it interested me so much I can't remember the name. What was it called? The Apprentice? Yeah. So, the premise of this show, from what I have discerned in my very brief viewing, was finding who was going to fit in and work the best in this structure or with this man. But my question is, how can you? If his is his way and it's always changing, and it's unique and individualistic, you have to be someone who is, so adaptable and part psychic to be able to constantly figure out to anticipate the needs of what's going to happen next. So there you see the conjunction at work. Now, we've already briefly spoken about the signs of the zodiac as being the sounding boards. And here it says, just as the tone of C sounds differently on a piccolo than on a cello, the tones of the planets express differently according to the sign in which they fall. I'm sure you're all familiar with these instruments. We're listening to the music of the north wind blowing in the background. Can you check to see if there's a blizzard happening out there? Any snow? Windy, no snow.
No snow.
The same tone will sound different on each of these instruments to our ear, even though air is moving at the same frequency. It's perceived differently. So it is with the zodiac. Each of these animals in this band of animals creates a different tonal expression. Because time is limited tonight, and we only have a half hour left in class, and I want to actually look at the sun in the houses. I'm pretty sure, since we talked about the fact that everyone knows sun sign astrology, you all probably know basic keywords for the signs, and we'll explore them more over the next few weeks. I'm just going to go quickly through the zodiac. Perhaps next week, yes.
Martha writes in that he and his children were on the Barbara Walters show, and he seemed to be very interested in their future.
Thank you, Martha. Yeah, the moon in the fifth house was the second most powerful influence. So after his powerful friends, there would be a very pervasive concern for his offspring, the fifth house. And nurturing them, how does Sagittarius, the moon in Sagittarius, nurture?
Wants to instruct.
Yes.
Teach.
No. I'll make you dinner tonight, but tomorrow night I'm going to teach you how to cook. You can eat every night, even when I'm not here. It's the old, you give a man a fish, he eats for a day, you teach him to fish, he eats for a lifetime. That's the Sagittarian form of nurturing when the moon is there. Any more questions or input? Thanks, Barb. So next week, I'll try and have a table of essential dignities for all of you. This actually stems from Babylonian times, these relationships of the planets and signs, and they're important to look at. Tonight, we're only going to talk about the sun. We decided its home is Leo, its detriment Aquarius, exaltation Aries. The fall is Libra, harmony Sagittarius, inharmony Gemini. Now the sun passes through the zodiac every 365.25 days and spends approximately 30 days in each sign. And the sun sign, the sign of the zodiac where the sun falls, are some of our most deep-seated traits. again, as I said, I'm going to rush through this because there's something else I want to cover tonight, which is houses. You all pretty much know about the signs right now, and we'll talk about them over the next few weeks. But the sun, the exaltation of the sun is in Aries, where the sun basically has full reign through positive expressions of leadership. If you think about it, what do those solar qualities want more than anything else? To be in control. And of all the signs of the zodiac, Aries has as its best quality leadership. So it really works for the sun to be in that sign. All right, let me rush through this. We're not going to talk about Taurus tonight. We will talk about Gemini only because this is the inharmony. What happens when the sun is in Gemini? This is a weak position for the sun. And the sun in Gemini tends to express with a lot of vacillation and with a lot of restlessness. What does the sun seek to express? Power, authority. And in Gemini, it's hard for him to settle on any one thing. So the authority seems to become undermined somehow when it's in that sign. These positions of essential dignity add a very small amount of harmony or discord to the chart. But nevertheless, we pay attention to them because it's, if you think about it, we've all gone into different homes that we feel really comfortable in, and others we can't wait to get out of. It's the same for each of the planets. So they respond favorably to some environments and less so to others. We'll zip through the sign of Cancer and on to Leo, which we'll discuss, because this is the home rule of the sun. The key word for Leo is I will. And again, the sun is the power urges. So the expression and the development of the will is strongest in this sign. Leo is considered to be the king of the bees, the queen of the bees. So the sun in this sign has the ability to express authority. Skip Virgo, but pay attention to Libra. Libra is opposite the sign of Aries, where the sun had such a good time expressing himself. Who's going to debate his authority when the sun is in Aries?
Libra.
So, when the sun is opposite that sign, what happens? The worst quality of Libra is approbativeness. Does anyone know what that is? It's being approval-seeking. The sun in Libra is looking for your good housekeeping seal of approval. Do you like me? Do you like me? I always call it the performing circus dog, backwards somersaults through flaming hoops just for a pat on the head. That's the sun in Libra. And it needs so much to receive approbation. So the sense of self-esteem, when the sun is in Libra, does not stem from self, which it does in Aries. It stems through needing that through others. We'll skip Scorpio in order to explore Sagittarius. The third of the fire signs, Sagittarius is mutable, so it's half human, half animal. And I always compare it, the power urges of the sun express well in that sign because Sagittarius, being mutable, can either, if there's a power vacuum, they'll step in and do something. They'll take the reins of control if it needs to be. If they see somebody else has better skills or greater ability, take over. I'm happy to step back, you do it. So that's the harmony of the sun when it falls in Sagittarius. We're going to skip the next two signs, three signs actually, being Aquarius. Well, no, we're talking about Aquarius, because this is the sun is at its detriment. What happens when the sun is opposite the sign of power, or I will? It becomes authority oppositional. So the worst trait of Aquarius, I'm sorry, my phone. You silly lad. Are there R's in Latin?
You're an Aquarius.
In Aquarius. In Aquarius, the authoritative nature of the sun expresses discordantly, being argumentative and authority oppositional. Skip Pisces, let's talk about the houses. Okay, hopefully you're not fatiguing yet. We've got another 20 minutes to go here. And again, each Thursday night for the next following 9 weeks, we're going to be repeating this same pattern that we've gone through tonight, which is looking at the nature of the physical nature of the planet, looking at its relationship to mythology, how that draws parallels in psychology and the urges within the unconscious. And then we're going to look at it in terms of what personality adequately represents that planet and a notable person, and then do this process of signs, houses, and specifically focusing on one aspect each week. So, the mundane houses represent the astral field of the Earth as it is receptive to the radiations of planetary energies. It also represents the divisions in the soul and the subconscious mind of the individual. We will sometimes refer to mundane houses as department of life. So, already you've heard this 3 times from me. Where the sun falls in your chart, that area is subject to vigor. So, even those of you out there in ether land, viewing on the web, pay attention, because I want you to think about your own charts over the next few minutes. Where the sun falls in our chart, it's through that area that we're seeking to find self-esteem and to somehow be an authority. Even if the sun is the weakest planet in your chart, there is still a seed desire to be an authority in some area. And the house position can help indicate where that is. Now we know from those persons such as the gentleman's chart with you tonight, if the sun's the most dominant planet in your chart, there's a great desire to seek authority. So, we're talking about the chart as a musical composition. We've looked at tones. We've looked at the sounding boards or the instruments on which they're being played. We've talked a bit about the composition itself being the aspects. But now, depending on where you're sitting in the auditorium, it's basically the price of your ticket, so to speak, determines how well you're hearing that music. In the auditorium, we're inside. However, the music's being played outside. Depending on whether you're by an open door, being the angular houses, 1, 4, 7, and 10, by wide open windows, which are houses 2, 5, 8, and 11, or solid walls, which are the cadent houses, which are houses 3, 6, 9, and 12. Oh, here's a long quote. Allow me. Now, about the Earth is its own field of astral force. And even as the place in an auditorium where the listener sits has an influence upon the volume and other acoustic properties of the sound the musical instruments play from the stage, so the place on Earth of an object or individual at the time has an influence upon the volume of the vibratory energy there received, and where a living organism is concerned, also an influence upon the department of life affected. That was only the first sentence.
Oh, this is all the vision.
The variation in the volume of a planet's energy that actually reaches a given spot, and the department of life chiefly affected by these energies, may accurately be mapped by a circle around the Earth, extending from the west to east and divided into 12 equal sections called mundane houses. Second sentence. I like the third one. The common horoscope blank maps these 12 houses. Succinct. All right. Sun in the first house. Where is the individual looking for their power?
With himself.
With himself or herself. This could take place through having either an outstanding personality. It might be through athleticism, building up physical strength and prowess, through cultivating ability of some kind, whether it's strength or talent. But basically, the sun in the first house has vital, it's an angular house, they have vital physical force. I always say when the sun's in the first house, you part the Red Seas. That person comes into a room and what happens? Heads turn. People notice that person, whether it's because they're somehow outstanding physically or because they have a presence that is somehow outstanding. What Zane says in the beginner's horoscope reader is, sun in the first house, with the power thought cells expressing through the personality, vitality, and ability to exercise authority or show. In the constant struggle for significance, the development and exercise of ability should be substituted for show and bragging. What about the second house? If your sun is in the second house, what is your self-esteem identified with? Your income or your collections. If this is really afflicted, it might lead to a hoarding complex. Everything has value and it's all a part of me. So, and occasionally you will find persons with the sun in the second house where their emphasis is not materialistic, but where their self-esteem is strongly tied in with their sense of values. It's not the valuables, but it's what they place value on in life. Zane in Beginner's Horoscope Maker and Reader says, sun in the second house, with the power thought cells expressing through possessions, desire to attain significance through money is shown. It should be realized that true significance comes through benefiting society. Quite often, sun in the second house, and depending on the aspects received, self-esteem raises or lowers according to the paycheck or the income received. It's tied into seeing money as a facet of self-worth. Anyone here with the sun in the first house? Anyone with the sun in the second house? Third house? All right. Let's talk about you. Sun in the third house places emphasis on matters related to education. One takes pride in their thoughts, in their studies, in their mental interests. Sometimes this can expand outwards to relationships with brothers and sisters or to their neighbors in their neighborhood. So, having the opportunity to express themselves is important, but also having the opportunity to learn is important. Zane says, with the power of thought selves expressing through education, desire to gain significance through writing or travel is shown. Educational opportunities should be sought. Anyone with the sun in the 4th house? This has to do with relationships with home, property, land, real estate, domestic matters, specifically the father. The sun there can indicate either a strong family, a authoritative father, but I always find when the sun is in the 4th house, the individual is somehow always seeking to gain the esteem of their family, specifically the father. The other thing about the sun in the 4th house is where do they want to rule?
The home.
In their home. So it can make living with them challenging. Why? They want to exercise control over the living space. No, you're not bringing that coffee table in my house. The power of thought cells expressing through the home, desire to gain significance through the home and at the end of life is shown. Comfort for others rather than exercising authority should be sought in the domestic life. Get the picture? Fifth house. Anyone with this special placement?
I'm on the cusp between the 4th and the 5th. It moves depending on the chart.
Or the house cusp system? Well, the 5th house has to do with love affairs, romance, creativity. So what I've discovered, persons with the sun in the 5th house, there can either be a sense of conquest in love, seeking out and having an objective and success in attaining one's desires there is very important. Or it can make for what one might call the stage mom, somebody who can seek a vicarious self-expression through their children. I didn't get ballet classes, but, little Billy will, or ice skating, and then there's going to be soccer and archery lessons. It's that sort of, you will do everything I didn't have the opportunities for. It's also somebody who needs to be creative. Persons with the sun in the 5th house, they want to be performers or entertainers or to draw in attention through a wider audience somehow. And this can even be through good storytelling or, throwing a good party somehow. What Zane says, we're going to have to move quickly because we're running out of time. But the power of thought cells expressing through pleasures, desire to gain significance through children, or entertainment is shown. Ability to entertain rather than show off should be cultivated. Sun in the 6th house, that person will serve their self-worth through their work, being of service somehow. Zane says, with the power of thought cells expressing through work, much concern with health and work is shown. Knowledge of diet and thought to influence vitality and health should be gained and used. Seventh house, marriage and partnerships. Interesting placement for the sun. On one hand, the person with the sun in the 7th house does want to somehow dominate their partner. But at the same time, they want a partner that's indomitable. Because they're only attracted to companions that are somehow outstanding or significant in some way. So, what do you think that leads towards? Occasionally, a power struggle. Now, their esteem is gathered through interfacing with the public. Eighth house, death taxes other people's resources. Psychic matters can be important when the sun's in the 8th house, or connecting up and collaborating with others. But the power of hot cells, especially through inheritance, significance of inheritance in the life is shown. That's a mouthful. Dependence on individual effort rather than on inheritance should be cultivated.
What was the area of cultivation for 7th house?
I think I skipped right through that. Let's see if I can zip backwards here. Okay. No?
No. No more.
Please.
There we go.
But the power thoughts also expressing through partnership, significance through marriage or partnership is shown. Marriage should be for love and harmony rather than for gain of power. Ninth house. Religion, philosophy, the higher mind. When the sun is in the 9th house, one is drawn constantly either to their spiritual life or to having adventures. It's important to them. The power of thought cells expressing through philosophy, that significance is thought through publicly expressed opinions is shown. Sound opinions should be sought. 10th house. Oops. If the sun is in the 10th house, this is another powerful house, like the 1st, 4th, and 7th house. Here, one's energies are tied up with their career, honor, their reputation, their public standing, their ability to influence others. And Zane says that the power of thought cells expressing through honor, significance is sought through business or politics. Ability to exercise authority wisely should be cultivated. We've got 2 more, and then I want to talk about your homework. 11th house, we talked about this already with Donald Trump. Friends, groups, organizations, the community. The power of thought cells expressing through friends that realizing hopes of significance depends on friends is shown. Friends of power and authority should be cultivated. And the 12th house has to do... Yes?
Phil in Michigan said he has a friend with the sun in the 12th house.
I'm glad to know you have a friend. Let's talk about the sun in the 12th house. Here we can see it's everything that's secretive and behind the scenes. 12th house people are private. They like to work in a solitary way and alone, and in introspective ways or in research and development pleases them most. And they're drawn to monastic life, monasteries, ashrams, retreats, etc. Now, of course, in old-timey astrology, you'll get a lot of scare messages with the 12th house because it's also seen as slavery, which in ancient astrology, that was one of the most common questions. Will I be made a slave? Because political life was so fickle for so many millennia that one could, lose freedom so readily. But it's other areas in our lives where we lose freedom. And I like to look at the 12th house as the house of addictions, where we lose our freedoms to other things in our lives. But I also like to look at it as the the house of inner space. So persons with the sun in the 12th house like to do a lot of internal exploration. But Phil, what Zane would say to your friend is that the power thought cells expressing through disappointment, powerful secret enemies, and heavy disappointments are shown. Wow, you great. The use of power and authority not to gain personal glory and advantage, but to relieve distress, is the best avenue to significance. So alleviating the suffering of others. This is almost Buddhistic in its message. So these are our upcoming classes. And oops, I didn't include the homework here, but on the back sheet of each of your handouts is a self-study guide for you to take home. I'm just going to read the questions out loud, and part of what I want this class to be is, an epiphany, a personal illumination. And the best way we can do that is taking a second look at our charts. Oftentimes when we've studied our charts, we think we know everything about them. But each time you take a second or third or fourth or fifth or 10th look, you discover new things. So it's a matter of going back and doing a personal inventory. And the questions are, the sun in my chart falls in the sign of, put it down. It has a space for you to write what you think are the best expressions and the worst expressions of the sun in that particular sign. Then the sun in my chart falls in and name the house. The activities ruled by this house are. Some of the ways I perceive my pride, self-esteem, and honor associated with this house are, fill in the blanks. Then you want to look at your astrodyne report, and the relative power of my sun by astrodynes is, write it down, not only the power, but then it says to put down the percentage of the power. The relative harmony or discord of my sun is, write that down, that's in the third column. And the way I perceive that affecting me is, work on gaining your insights about whether or not you have a harmonious or discordant sun and how that functions in your life. And then the positive qualities of the sun that I express are, fill in the blank, and the negative qualities of the sun I express are. We're going to do the same thing with our charts with each of the planets over the next 10 weeks. This is for you. You're not bringing this back to me to judge you with. But this is part of this is taking a personal inventory, basically, is what this class is about. Any questions? All right.
You might mention that to the viewers that the handouts are on the right side of the screen.
To our viewing public via Church of Light TV, if you have expanded your screen to full screen, you need to push on the escape button, which will bring it down to the smaller size. And then on the right-hand side of your screen, we'll list the classes for the next several weeks. Underneath tonight's class, in case you did not get this information when I gave it to you at the beginning of the class, there is a icon there which is to access a PDF file of the handouts for tonight's class. And for you who will not be here next week, you can at least get the handouts that way, even if you can't see me here waving my arms and being entertaining. So.
And maybe mention that we will have these archived in the next few weeks. Would that be right? Yeah.
Yes, if God is good, all things work out as one hopes. We will be archiving each of these classes so that one can go back and access them at a later date on our website. So your good wishes are essential in that happening, not to mention your donations. We've spent a lot of wonderful money on new sound equipment. For those of you who have suffered in the past trying to hear what we were saying, hopefully tonight worked out really well for you. So Your donations are being reinvested in equipment on our end to make all of this possible.
There's been several comments that the sound is much better.
Great, thanks for the feedback. All right, signing off, good night, and same time, same place.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.